Well, a very good afternoon from Phuket, and today is Thursday the 23rd of April. Normally I start off with the figures, which I'm going to do in a moment. We have had a few new developments over the last 4 or 5 days since my last video, which I'm going to run through briefly. I want to mention first of all that it seems like the weather has now changed in Phuket. It has been very, very hot, and it still is very hot. In fact, this year is one of the hottest years that I can remember for a long time here in Phuket. It's been quite unbearable at times. Average daily temperatures around 34-35 degrees, and I know this because we have an air conditioning unit. When I switch it on, the readout gives me the actual temperature, and then of course as the temperature lowers with the air conditioning working, it shows the temperature of the room as it currently stands. And many times I've switched it on over the last sort of few months and it's been showing above 30 degrees, and this is a shaded room inside a building, so obviously the temperatures outside in the direct sunlight are going to be a few degrees hotter than that. Yesterday it was showing 34 degrees on the air conditioning unit when I switched it on just after lunchtime. Temperatures are very, very hot at the moment, but we are now seeing rain in Phuket, quite heavy bouts of rain, so we're getting thunderstorms, quite heavy ones. The last week, 2 weeks, we've seen quite a bit of rain, and of course Phuket actually needs that rain because we had a very long hot year last year. We didn't get a lot of rain, which meant the reservoirs were quite low, and again it really sort of set this year up for being the same way, with the water levels already at a very low level, and I think they were at an extremely low level the last time I looked, and there was a lot of places around the island that was running short of water, and indeed a lot of water trucks going out to various parts of the island. I have a private lagoon, I suppose, opposite to where I live, but it's privately owned. It's not owned by the government as far as I know, but there's been a lot of activity over the last sort of 2 months with water trucks going in and out constantly, taking water from the lagoon and delivering it to, I guess, people's homes and also hotels and businesses across the island, because of course the main reservoir's very, very low. So I'm pleased to say the rains have come back, and it looks like we are going to get a period now of rain. Cloudy today, but still very, very warm. Again, above 30 degrees today. I've had to turn the air conditioning on in this room to cool it down while I'm doing the video because it's just too much. The sweat, even when you're not doing anything, is just running down your back. But let's now take a look at the figures for today, and then I'm going to quickly talk about the figures that have been over the last 4 or 5 days. Some developments that are coming our way, not only now but over the next coming week also. So for today's figures, starting off with the whole of Thailand, we have had 13 new cases, which now takes the total of cases with the virus in Thailand to 2,839. Unfortunately, we have had 1 death also today, which now takes the death total to 50. Now here in Phuket, we've had 1 new case today, which takes our total to 197. There have been no deaths in Phuket so far. Now there was a person reported that initially it was reported that the person had died from coronavirus, but the person that was reported to have died from the coronavirus was actually involved in a motorbike accident, but he had been infected with the coronavirus, and this is where the initial reports were incorrect. So as far as I know, he actually died from injuries sustained from an accident involving himself on a motorbike, and he did not die from the coronavirus here in Phuket. So currently we don't have any deaths in Phuket, which is a good thing. Of course, 50 deaths across the whole of Thailand, whilst that figure, as I've mentioned before, is still very low, and I do want to talk about this a little bit more further into the video. 50 deaths, of course, is 50 deaths too many. I would have liked to see that at 0, but unfortunately that's not the case. Now, moving on, some developments. We have had the Phuket governor replaced here in Phuket. This was announced actually quite a few days ago, and I forgot to mention it in my last video, but we are awaiting the official announcement now, and then the governor will be replaced. Now, I'm not quite sure why they've decided to replace the governor at this point in time. I guess the powers that be are not too happy with what has happened in Phuket. I don't know. I can only surmise about that. I don't actually know. But the governor is going to be replaced here in Phuket, so we are having a new governor. Also, there's been an issue over the last sort of week and a half about energy bills and energy prices. A lot of people are not happy at the current energy bills. Of course, with everybody having to stay at home at the moment with restrictions on movement, etc., people have been using more electricity, of course, but a lot of people have been reporting their bills not only doubling, in some cases tripling. I've heard horrendous stories on the media outlets of people having bills of over 10,000 baht when their original bill was 2,000 or 3,000 baht, and then all of a sudden it's jumped to 10,000 baht. So the government have been looking into that, and they have announced that we should be getting some discounts on the electric bills, but I'm not sure exactly when that will be coming into play. There has been talk that it's going to be this month, next month, etc. But again, a lot of talk going on here in Thailand and not a lot of action. That refers to not only the electric bills but other things that have been talked about in the past but have not been forthcoming, unfortunately. Now, a bit of good news for all foreigners staying here in Thailand at the moment. In the last couple of days, we have heard that the visa amnesty, which was originally due to finish at the end of this month, has now been extended to the 31st of July. So that is a great step forward. Obviously, it takes a lot of pressure off people with the borders still being closed, the Phuket airport being closed. Not easy to travel now around Thailand at all if you need to go outside the country to renew your visa stamp, etc. It's going to be very, very difficult at the moment. At least the government have recognised that, extended the visa amnesty, so we don't have to panic now until the 31st of July. Hopefully by that period the borders will start to open up and the regulations will be eased and people may be able to travel a lot easier than what they can at the moment. Now, I am going to get on to the restriction of movements, as I prefer to call it, rather than the lockdown, which people have been referring to. And as I've mentioned many times on previous videos, I haven't seen a lot of evidence in my personal area of a complete and utter lockdown. There has been restrictions, yes, as I mentioned before, but still a lot of movement. And I have noticed over the last few days a lot more movement in my particular area. I feel I'm getting the sense that people are starting to become restless, getting fed up of staying at home. They're moving around a lot more, and I think the government are now under a bit more pressure as to what they're going to do regarding these movements of restrictions, because of course myself and a lot of other people have been under the restrictions now for 6 weeks, coming up for 2 months. Businesses have been closed for quite some time, and people are now sort of looking at the government and saying, well, when are the restrictions going to be eased? We are seeing a lot of low reported cases. Again, going back over the last few days, as I've mentioned, 13 new cases today. Yesterday there were 15 cases, 19 the day before, 27 and 32. Obviously I would like to see them lower still, but I still think they're quite low. Again, I've had a few messages and emails about the numbers and official numbers. One thing I've been talking to my friends about quite recently and discussing it with a few of my very close friends, whilst the reported numbers, people are saying the official figures are not correct and we can all speculate about the figures. One thing I would like to draw people's attention to, and even leave me some answers down at what they feel the answers are to this question: why is Thailand seeing very, very low deaths? Now, some people are going to certainly jump on and say because the figures are not correct. Now, I'm going to put this forward, and it is my opinion on this. Now, obviously the official figures of new cases are going to vary because of the testing, I realise that. But cases of deaths, that is something totally different. Now, at the moment, we have a death total here in Thailand standing at 50 cases. Now, if you look at any country around the world that has got a high infection rate of new cases, they also have a high death rate, unfortunately. I'll give you one example. The UK, I noticed this morning, has now surpassed 18,100 deaths That is an awful lot of people that have died since the virus has started in the UK. Of course, their cases are way, way higher than Thailand, so that reflects in the deaths. Of course, if there's a lot of deaths, there's also a lot of cases. Now, it is my thinking that Thailand has only 50 deaths, so the cases of infections must be relatively low. If you look at the cases in any country that are really, really high, they also have a very high death rate. Now, explain to me how Thailand can have a low death rate but very high case numbers of infections. I don't see it myself. And I know people are going to say that the government are covering up the figures. Well, honestly, I don't believe they're covering up the deaths. Whilst the figures may not be 100% accurate on the cases, the deaths, I think, are quite accurate. And now the reason why I say this is, bear with me and I will explain why I come to this conclusion. And I've spoken to several of my close friends about this and they agree with me on it as well. It's very difficult to hide deaths. If we'd got hundreds and hundreds of people dying here in Thailand, in hospitals, don't you think that would get out? With how easy it is nowadays to access social media, anybody with a phone now can take a picture and post it online within a few seconds, and that picture can be being looked at the other side of the world. So with that in mind, if there were hundreds of people dying in hospitals here in Thailand, I'm sure that would get out. There is no way that the government would be able to hide that, and that's why I feel that the actual figures here that are being reported are reasonably accurate. I'm not going to say 100% accurate because I think that's wrong. It's very hard to get 100% accurate. As I've mentioned before, you would have to test every single person every single day in a country to know the exact figures, and I think that's impossible to do. So whilst the figures may not be 100% accurate, I do ask people to think about the deaths. We have 50 deaths in Thailand. Why are the deaths so low if you are saying that we have a lot more infections? Because surely if we have a lot of infections, we should also be seeing a lot of deaths. And I don't believe for 1 minute that the deaths are being covered up, because as I've said, anybody can access social media now, the same as what's happened in China. They tried to cover it up and it got out. And I know for 1 minute, if there were hundreds and hundreds of people dying here in Thailand, it would get out. So I don't believe that as an answer when people say, oh, the government are covering it. I just don't take that. I'm sorry, but personally I don't believe that. I think that for whatever reason, and I don't know why it is, again, I've talked to my friends about this situation here. Why? Because at the start of the virus spread, we were having flights coming in to not only Thailand, but in Phuket from Wuhan, which was the epicentre of the virus. On a daily basis, there was quite a lot of people travelling, and everybody said because of this, we were going to see massive rates of infection here, and we haven't seen them. Now, why that is, I don't know. Again, people are going to say the numbers. Let's just put that to one side for a minute. Why haven't we seen thousands of people dying here in Thailand? What is being done here that's being done differently? Because I'm certainly not, anybody that knows me, I'm not a big government person, but I will say that whatever has been done here in Thailand has been done fairly well, because we are not seeing high death rates. So I have to say, whatever the government have done, it has worked. But I think there are other factors as well that have helped to keep the case numbers and the deaths down low here in Thailand. And one of those, these are my personal feelings. I must stress this is my personal feelings. One of these, I believe, is the wearing of masks. And why I say that is because here in Thailand, masks are worn all the time. Forget about the virus for 1 minute. They're worn on a daily basis. A lot of people wear them because of traffic pollution. So most people here, when I say most people, I'm talking about Thai nationals and a good percentage of foreigners as well, but not all foreigners, I must admit. There are some reluctancies with foreigners to wear masks, and again, I'm going to mention that in a moment. But most of the Thai people, I'm not going to say all, but most are quite familiar with wearing masks because of air pollution, etc. So it wasn't a big shock to have to wear them all the time anyway for a lot of people here. And I do feel that the combination of the wearing the masks and possibly The climate here. Now, I know people have dismissed this and said the virus is immune to high temperatures and humidity. I'm not so sure, because how do we explain the low number of deaths? Now, again, forget about this cover-up scenario. Let's just go on the deaths that we know about, which is 50. Why have we got such a low number on deaths when people keep maintaining that we have high infections that the government are trying to cover up? Well, if that's the case, surely if we have a high number of infections, then people would also be dying as well. Because look around the world. Now, I'll give you an example of the UK. Look at America, look at Italy, look at Spain. Lots and lots and lots of deaths, unfortunately. And my heart goes out to those people that have lost family members. Now, I was watching some news the other day on YouTube, and I was absolutely just mind blown away with the American people protesting about wanting to come out of restrictions and not being in a lockdown, not wanting to wear masks and let me be free or catch the virus. And I just can't get my head around some of the people there, because I just think it's just ludicrous there the way they're thinking. They still think this is a hoax. Well, if they think it's a hoax, they should talk to some of the people that have lost family members. That's all I can say, because there's not just one or two. We're talking about an awful lot of people around the world now that's been affected by this virus, and saying it's a hoax is just, well, I just don't know where their thinking's coming from, I'll be honest with you. But looking at those countries where they have massive high rates of infections, they also have high number of deaths, and we haven't seen that in Thailand. So that sort of tells me that we must have a lot lower numbers than people are surmising. And of course it is only surmising because nobody exactly knows the true figures. But the death count, I would say, is more accurate than maybe the case numbers, because it's going to be far, far more difficult to hide hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people dying. I just don't think that's going to be so easy to do. And as I've mentioned, with today's technology, it's so easy for people to leak information out nowadays, from the government, from media sources, from things like that. I just can't see it being concealed if there were hundreds of people dying here. I just don't believe that's the case. I may be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I may be completely wrong. It may come to light. But I'm hoping that I'm not wrong on this, and that the deaths are fairly accurate here. And if that is the case, why are we seeing so low numbers here in Thailand? What is it different here that we've managed to do, or managed to avoid a high number of deaths here? Is it the wearing of face masks? Is it the climate? Because this year has been very, very hot, very humid and very hot. We're seeing average temperatures, as I mentioned, 35 degrees and above in the daytime. The humidity is just off the scale. I mean, literally just walking from downstairs to upstairs and my back's soaking wet with sweat. That's how hot it is. And apart from running air conditioning 24/7, you can't get away from it. Going back to what I was talking about, it is very, very, very hot at the moment, and that may have helped to slow the virus, stem the virus, I don't know. But I think a mixture of the wearing of the masks, the climate, people are now starting to distance themselves. Even Nat has mentioned that when she goes to the market in the morning now, people are starting to spread out, give more room to each other, which was not being done initially. I have been out once or twice, again, just for shopping. I have noticed a lot more people wearing masks. Now, I'm not going to say all, because, again, I'm still seeing the odd person. But it's getting less and less. More and more people are wearing some sort of face covering, a mask. I've even seen people going out now with the face shields on. So people are taking it very serious over here, and they're starting to realise that this is a serious issue around the world, and they're trying to do what they can to keep the numbers down. And I think that is one of the reasons why we are seeing low numbers here, especially as regards deaths. So I'd be interested to know your comments on this subject, so please do post them in the comments section below. Now, of course, you're all going to jump in and say I'm an idiot, I'm a whatever, whatever. But I'm interested in to know what your comments are as regards the deaths. I'm not talking about cases now. We are seeing very, very low deaths, and there aren't many countries in the world that are seeing these sort of low numbers of deaths when they've got very high case numbers. So, again, I'm interested to know a little bit of feedback. I've talked it over with a few of my friends, and we've all agreed that because the number of deaths are quite low. We don't feel that Thailand has got a high infection rate. The government have, of course, closed off transport here coming into the country now. The airport here in Phuket is closed and remains still closed. We're not sure when these restrictions are going to be lifted up, and this is what I want to move on to now. Because starting from the end of the month, it has now been talked about that restrictions are going to be lifted. I don't know exactly where this will take place. They are saying Bangkok and Phuket and a few other provinces may be the last ones to have restrictions or all the restrictions removed, because we've seen more outbreaks here than elsewhere in Thailand. So of course provinces that haven't recorded any cases may well indeed have a lot more restrictions lifted a lot quicker. But I am hoping now, after this period of time, that the government are going to remove some of the movement restrictions that we've seen here in Phuket, such as district to district being removed, so people can move around the island a little bit more freely. Obviously, I'm not saying that everything should be removed in one go. Please do not misunderstand me. I'm not saying let's remove everything, let's take everything away, because of course we're going to get a spike if we do that. We still need to understand that the virus is still here. It's not going to disappear overnight. However, I do feel now that we're at a point where case numbers can be controlled. We're at most days less than 20, and if they can't control 20 cases all over the Thailand a day, then we're never going to get there. We're never going to get out of the restrictions, because at the end of the day, the economy is taking a battering now. There's a lot of businesses that have had to close, that have been shut for a long period of time. Unfortunately, there were announcements made that the government was going to come and help the people with businesses that had to be closed. But unfortunately, these haven't been forthcoming as yet. And a lot of people are still waiting. Now, you can only wait so long for help. And then if that help doesn't come, you have to do something yourself, because money doesn't last forever, unfortunately. And unless you're extremely rich, you cannot afford to be permanently closed. I know this is an issue that's foremost at my mind at the moment, because I'm worried how much longer we personally have to close for, because I don't have an income at the moment. And that is very worrying, because we still have to pay bills, and those bills have to be paid. Now, I've also had a chat with Nat, and she's told me one of her friends who worked in one of the shopping malls. The shopping malls, of course, have closed. She's been out of work for some time. She's got behind on the rent because she couldn't pay the month's rent. Her landlord asked her to move out, told her she'd got to go, even though it wasn't her fault. Now, we all have to work together, and that's an unfortunate situation. Some people are just that way inclined. But this is the sort of situation where we are now getting to. People are getting very tight for money, not only for rent, for bills, for food, everything. We are seeing, obviously, handouts of free food, but it's not the answer to everyone. Some people have businesses that are getting very, very close now to going to bankruptcy and things like that. So we do need some restrictions lifting so these businesses can open. But of course there needs to be measures in place to allow these businesses to open safely. So maybe one customer in the business at a time. Of course, precautions need to be taken. Cleaning of hands, obviously wearing masks, even the face guards if necessary, gloves, etc. And then once the customer leaves, wiping everything down. In our case, this is what I'm talking about, our business at the moment. Those sort of measures need to be in place. And I fully understand that, and we're quite willing to do whatever it takes to minimise the risk. But we also need our business to be open to earn some income, because we cannot carry on month after month without earning any money. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in this situation. I am now sure there are thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses all around the world that are now in this situation. You cannot go for an indefinite period of time. You have to say, well, enough's enough. Let's start to lift some of the restrictions. So I'm hoping at the end of the month we're going to be allowed to partially open, or some businesses allowed to open. Obviously high risk businesses may have to remain closed for a while, but again, precautions need to be taken. I'm not expecting people just to remove everything. We need to do it sensibly, that's what I'm saying. But the government need to look at this now, because there hasn't been any help forthcoming to a lot of businesses, and we're now getting very, very tight on money, and the situation is very, very worrying. I'm seeing more and more people moving around, so I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of people getting restless now. They want to get back to life of some description, not just be stuck at home, sitting there day after day, wondering what's going to happen. We are seeing low case numbers now being officially reported, low deaths being reported. We're down to 1, 2, 3 at the very most in a day, which is a lot lower than many, many countries around the world. I have to sort of say that now. I mean, the UK still over 700 deaths a day. I mean, we're reporting 1, maybe 2 or 3 a day, so a massive, massive difference. And if we cannot get out of movement restrictions and this so-called lockdown, then how are other countries going to deal with this? Because, as I mentioned, you just can't go on for an indefinite period of time living like this. There has to be a balance somewhere. So I do feel now that the government hopefully will start to remove some of the restrictions towards the end of this month, maybe allow us to partly reopen, maybe one customer at a time, as I say, hand gels, masks, etc., cleaning, and also other businesses to open and get a little, I'm not saying back to normal, because that's not going to be the case. We all know this virus is not going to go away overnight, and if we just go back to how we were before, then of course we're going to see more cases developing. So I do feel that some businesses should be allowed to start to open. Comments, again, leave them down in the description. It's always good to get some feedback, but I do feel now, after sort of 6 weeks, we need to get back to some normality, because it's just, where do we go from here? How many months do we wait? Even if we wait till August, the virus is still going to be there. So I personally can't see how we're going to get much lower case numbers and reported deaths. Obviously, it would be great to get to 0, but realistically, we're not going to get rid of the virus overnight. That's not simply going to happen. People need to still take precautions, and things need to be left in place to a degree. But also the economy, businesses, normal life needs to get working again, because people are finding it very difficult now to survive. Now, let me just have a quick look down the list of things that I wanted to discuss. I think that's everything. I've discussed a little bit about the weather. I've discussed about the change in governors. I've discussed the visa amnesty, the possible restrictions, also the deaths being so low. Your thoughts and feelings on that. Any relevant comments and questions, I will try to get back to you on and do my best. But please do bear with me, because I do get quite a few now coming in, both on emails and on my Facebook pages, etc. So do check those out if you haven't had a look. Now, as always, my thoughts are with everybody around the world. I want everybody to be safe and take care out there. And thank you for watching the video. So until next time, I will catch you on the next one.